Hello, my dear friend. Today, I want to share a story close to my heart. A story about love, life, and the unexpected paths that lead us to the people who make us whole. My name is Emma, and I'm 28 years old. I work as a graphic designer for a small but ambitious creative agency in Seattle. My days are filled with colors, concepts, and deadlines. But this story isn't about my work. It's about something far more personal and transformative. I live alone in a cozy apartment on the third floor of an old brick building. It's nothing fancy, but it's mine. My mornings usually start with a cup of coffee on the balcony, watching the city wake up. I've always been a bit of a dreamer, lost in my thoughts, sketching scenes I wish I could step into. Love, for me, had always been a distant concept. Sure, I'd had a couple of relationships, but nothing that felt like the kind of love you read about in novels or watch in movies. I often joked with my best friend, Lily, that I was too busy designing logos to design a love life. But life has a funny way of surprising you when you least expect it. It was a rainy Thursday evening in October, and I had stayed late at the office to finish a project. By the time I left, the streets were slick with rain, and the sky was a canvas of dark clouds. I had just stepped out of the building, fumbling with my umbrella, when I noticed someone struggling with a flat tire by the curb. He was drenched, his white shirt clinging to his frame, his dark hair plastered to his forehead. Normally, I would have walked by. What could I possibly do to help with a flat tire? But something about his frustration tugged at me. "Need some help?" I asked, my voice hesitant. He looked up, startled, and then chuckled. "Unless you happen to be a mechanic, I think I'm beyond help." There was a hint of humor in his voice, and I found myself smiling despite the rain. "Well, I'm no mechanic, but I can hold the flashlight while you figure it out." He laughed, a warm, genuine sound that cut through the chilly evening. "I'd appreciate that." His name was Ethan, and he was in Seattle on business. He lived in Portland and worked as a freelance writer. As he wrestled with the spare tire, we talked about the rain, our jobs, and our favorite coffee shops. By the time he finished, my umbrella had done little to keep me dry, but I didn't mind. "Thank you, Emma," he said, brushing his hands on his jeans. "I owe you one." "Just pay it forward," I replied, feeling oddly lighthearted. As we parted ways, I couldn't shake the feeling that something had shifted. The next morning, I found a text message waiting for me. It was from Ethan. I had almost forgotten that I had given him my number, scribbled on the back of a receipt so he could send me updates about his tire situation. "Hey, Emma. Thanks again for last night. Made it back to my hotel in one piece. Coffee's on me next time I'm in town. If you're interested?" I stared at the message, my heart doing a little flip. I wasn't sure if I was ready for anything more than a casual coffee, but something about Ethan felt different. Over the next few weeks, we texted and called each other often. Our conversations flowed effortlessly, ranging from silly jokes to deep discussions about life and dreams. He told me about his travels and the novel he was working on, while I shared my latest design projects and my dreams of one day opening my own studio. When he returned to Seattle a month later, we met for coffee. Seeing him again felt strangely natural, as if we'd known each other for years. We spent the afternoon wandering through Pike Place Market, sampling fresh fruit, browsing quirky shops, and laughing at a street performer's antics. Ethan and I started seeing each other whenever he was in town, and over time, those visits became more frequent. What began as a chance encounter on a rainy night grew into something I hadn't expected, a connection that felt both exhilarating and comforting. One evening, as we sat by the waterfront watching the sunset, he turned to me and said, "Emma, have you ever thought about taking a risk? Not in work, but in life?" I smiled, a little confused. "What do you mean?" "I mean this, us. I know we're in different cities, and I know it's not conventional, but I think what we have is worth the effort. I want to see where this can go, if you're willing." His honesty caught me off guard, but in the best way. I realized then that I wanted the same thing. Our relationship wasn't without its challenges. The distance wasn't easy, and there were moments when our schedules seemed impossible to align. But we made it work because we wanted to. Ethan's visits became longer, and eventually, he started looking for opportunities to move to Seattle. The day he told me he'd found a place just a few blocks from mine, I felt like the universe had aligned in our favor. 1 year after that rainy night, Ethan and I stood at the same spot where we first met. The rain was falling softly, and he held my hand as we laughed about how neither of us had expected a flat tire to lead to this. "I guess I owe the rain an apology," he said, grinning. I laughed. "And I owe you a lifetime of flashlight duty." Ethan and I continued to grow together in ways I never thought possible. Life wasn't always picture perfect, but it was ours. Flawed, messy, and filled with moments of pure joy. As he settled into life in Seattle, we found a rhythm that worked for us, building a home together. One of my favorite memories was the first weekend we spent decorating his new apartment. Ethan had insisted on doing everything himself, to make it feel like home, he said. But as it turned out, his taste in home decor was eclectic, to put it mildly. "What do you think about this?" he asked, holding up a neon green lamp shaped like a cactus. I couldn't hold back a laugh. "I think it belongs in a bachelor pad from a bad sitcom." He feigned offense, clutching the lamp to his chest. "You wound me, Emma. This is a masterpiece." In the end, we compromised. My minimalist designs balanced out his quirky finds. The result was a cozy space that felt like a reflection of both of us, navigating the tough times. Of course, there were challenges too. Ethan's freelance work was unpredictable, and some months were harder than others. I remember one particularly stressful evening when he'd just lost a big client. "I feel like I'm failing," he admitted, his voice heavy with frustration. I sat beside him, taking his hand in mine. "You're not failing, Ethan. This is just part of the journey. You've got so much talent, and I believe in you, even when you don't." He looked at me, his eyes softening. "How do you always know what to say?" "I don't," I said with a small smile. "But I know how much you mean to me, and I'll always remind you of your worth when you forget." Moments like these taught us the importance of being each other's anchor, the little things that matter. Over time, it wasn't the grand gestures that defined our relationship, but the little things. The Sunday mornings spent cooking pancakes together, the late-night drives with no destination, and the quiet evenings curled up on the couch with a book and a blanket. Ethan had a way of making even the mundane feel special. One rainy afternoon, as we sat by the window watching the raindrops race down the glass, he turned to me and said, "You know, the best part of my day is just being with you." And it was moments like that, simple, honest, and unassuming, that made me realize how lucky I was to have found someone who truly saw me. The proposal, about 2 years after we first met, Ethan took me back to Pike Place Market. It was a sunny Saturday morning, and the market was alive with its usual hustle and bustle. As we walked past the flower stalls and street musicians, he suddenly stopped. "Remember the first time we came here?" he asked, a soft smile on his face. "Of course," I replied. "You bought me that ridiculous fruit basket because you didn't know what else to do with your hands." He laughed, reaching into his pocket. "Well, this time, I know exactly what to do." Before I could process what was happening, he was down on one knee, holding out a small velvet box. "Emma, you've turned my world upside down in the best way possible. You've been my partner, my best friend, and my biggest supporter. I can't imagine a life without you. Will you marry me?" Tears blurred my vision as I nodded, my heart swelling with happiness. "Yes, Ethan. 1,000,000 times, yes." The market erupted in cheers, and as he slipped the ring onto my finger, I felt like the luckiest woman in the world. Our new chapter, planning the wedding, was an adventure in itself, but that's a story for another time. What mattered most was that we were embarking on a new chapter together, one filled with love, laughter, and endless possibilities. Wedding preparations, a comedy of errors. We decided on a small, intimate ceremony, just close friends and family. But even with a modest guest list, there were endless decisions to make. One afternoon, as we sampled cakes at a local bakery, Ethan had a particularly strong reaction to one flavor. "This tastes like cardboard dipped in sugar," he declared, his face scrunched up in disgust. The baker, who was standing just a few feet away, coughed loudly. I nudged Ethan under the table, whispering, "Subtlety, Ethan. Subtlety." We left the bakery with an apology and a newfound appreciation for diplomacy in wedding planning. Then there was the issue of the venue. We fell in love with a charming garden space that looked like it had been plucked from a fairy tale. However, during our visit, a family of geese decided to crash the scene, honking loudly and chasing us halfway across the property. "Maybe an indoor venue isn't such a bad idea," Ethan joked as we huffed, out of breath. Despite the hiccups, every step brought us closer to the big day, and the process itself became a series of cherished memories. The wedding day. The morning of the wedding was a blur of excitement. My best friend, Lily, helped me into my dress, her eyes misty as she adjusted the delicate lace sleeves. "You look beautiful, Emma," she said, her voice thick with emotion. "Ethan's going to lose it when he sees you." As I stood before the mirror, I took a deep breath, letting the reality of the moment sink in. This was it, the beginning of forever. Ethan later told me that his nerves hit their peak the moment the music began to play. As I walked down the aisle, his expression was a mixture of awe and pure love. It felt like time had slowed, and for a brief moment, it was just the two of us in the world. The ceremony was simple and heartfelt. When it came time to exchange vows, Ethan surprised me with words that left me speechless. "Emma, you are my light in the dark, my calm in the chaos, and my reason to believe in magic. I promise to stand by you, to laugh with you, and to love you more every single day." I barely made it through my own vows without crying, and as we exchanged rings, the applause of our friends and family felt like a warm embrace. A honeymoon to remember. We chose Italy for our honeymoon, a country neither of us had visited, but both had dreamed of exploring. From the moment we landed in Rome, it was an adventure. We wandered through ancient ruins, indulged in endless plates of pasta, and got lost in the winding streets of Venice. One night, as we sat by the canals, sipping wine under a blanket of stars, Ethan reached for my hand. "I wish I could freeze this moment," he said softly. "Just you, me, and the sound of the water." I smiled, leaning into him. "We don't need to freeze it, we just need to remember it." The everyday magic of married life. Returning home, we quickly discovered that the magic of marriage wasn't in grand gestures, but in the quiet moments we shared. Cooking breakfast together on lazy Sundays, dancing in the kitchen to old songs, and laughing over silly inside jokes. Ethan, ever the romantic, made a point of leaving little notes around the house. I'd find them tucked into my purse, slipped into books, or taped to the bathroom mirror. Each one was a sweet reminder of his love. And when life threw challenges our way, as it inevitably did, we faced them together. Ethan's freelance career stabilized, and I grew more confident in my new role at work. We learned to communicate better, to lean on each other, and to never take our partnership for granted. As the years passed, Ethan and I built a life that felt deeply, uniquely ours. We navigated milestones, surprises, and everyday life with a shared sense of humor and unwavering support for each other. First home, first adventures. A couple of years after the wedding, we bought our first home. A cozy little house with a white picket fence and a garden that needed far more work than we anticipated. Moving in was a chaotic adventure, complete with misplaced boxes, furniture that refused to fit through the doors, and one memorable evening spent trying to assemble a bed frame with an instruction manual written entirely in Swedish. "That's it," Ethan said, dropping the Allen wrench in defeat. "We're sleeping on the floor tonight." I laughed, brushing sawdust from my hands. "At least we'll have a story to tell." And we did. Our home became a collection of stories. The garden eventually bloomed under our care, and the walls filled with photos of our travels, friends, and family. Expanding our family one crisp autumn morning, I handed Ethan a small gift box with trembling hands. Inside was a tiny onesie that read, "Future Adventure Buddy." His reaction was everything I'd hoped for, pure joy, mixed with a hint of disbelief. "We're having a baby," he whispered, his voice thick with emotion. I nodded, tears streaming down my face. "We are." The months that followed were a blur of excitement and preparation. Ethan read every parenting book he could find, and I spent countless hours designing the nursery. When our daughter, Lily, arrived, it felt like our hearts had grown tenfold. Lily brought a new kind of magic into our lives. Watching Ethan hold her for the first time, his eyes filled with wonder, was a moment I'll never forget. "She's perfect," he said softly, cradling her tiny hand in his. Balancing dreams and reality parenthood brought its own set of challenges, but we faced them together. There were sleepless nights, moments of doubt, and days when we wondered if we were doing anything right. But there were also first steps, bedtime giggles, and the indescribable joy of seeing the world through Lily's eyes. Ethan and I made a promise to each other early on. No matter how busy life got, we'd always make time for us. Whether it was a quiet date night at home after Lily was asleep, or a weekend getaway while her grandparents babysat, we prioritized our relationship. The gift of time. As Lily grew older, so did we. Wiser, hopefully, and more appreciative of the time we had together. One day, while packing for a family trip to the mountains, Ethan found the journal where I'd written about our early days. "Emma, have you read this recently?" he asked, flipping through the pages. I shook my head. "Not in years. Why?" He smiled, handing it to me. "Because it's a reminder of how far we've come." That evening, after Lily had gone to bed, we sat on the couch and read through the journal together. We laughed at the memories, cringed at our younger selves' naivety, and marveled at the life we'd built. The next chapter, now, as I sit here with Ethan beside me and Lily playing in the garden, I feel an overwhelming sense of gratitude. Life isn't always perfect, but it's beautiful in its imperfection. If there's one thing I've learned, it's that love isn't a single moment or a grand gesture. It's the countless small choices we make every day to show up, to forgive, to laugh, and to hold on, even when things get tough. And so, dear friend, if you're reading this, know that love is worth the wait, worth the effort, and worth every twist and turn. Our story is still being written, and I can't wait to see what the next chapter holds. Who knows? Maybe one day I'll share this story with Lily and watch as she adds her own chapters to the beautiful, messy, wonderful tale of life.